So this season was an absolute roller coaster, and not just down to the £300 million worth of players I sold. So let's talk about that. Now sadly, this year, for the first time in ages, we don't have any Hungarian sides in European finals. I'm just kidding, of course we do. What are we, a bunch of amateurs? So join us over on stream after this video as we get stuck into yet another European final. And the VODs of all the streams can of course be found on the second channel, linked in the description. They go live the day after every single stream. Excuse the slightly subdued lighting and stuff in here right now. It is blisteringly hot in this room, hence why I've had to go sans blind. That isn't a gateway to heaven, I promise. It's also why I look like I should probably be solving crimes in 1980s Miami with a pet alligator, but that's a story for another day. Because for now, season 25 of Building a Nation with MTK Budapest was set to be one of huge gains in theory, with the gap to England at the start of the season shrinking down to just 6 coefficient points. We knew that if we had a solid year and could stay with them and hopefully be there should they falter, there's always a chance for us to overtake them in the coming seasons. But before that, there is just the little matter of that Champions League final from last year, which we only went and bloody won. Of course we did, making it our 5th UCL title in the save. And this was a big one for us. It really was, because we were actually playing really well in this game. Things were not going well, though, when Marvin Alunga scored Real Madrid's first chance. And we've been there before. We lost a European final to them a couple of years ago in almost identical circumstances. But this time, we did not let it get to us. We made a couple of little tweaks in the second half, brought on 17-year-old János. And would you believe it, within, I think, 2 minutes of coming onto the pitch, he'd scored the equaliser in the final. And then our second substitute, Stojnic, who'd come on to just give us a bit of depth at one point, flicked a header on, and Blaž Žurin was able to slam home the winner for us in the 83rd minute. Completely deserved win for us, but just a massive one for us to turn around a result in a Champions League final, and for once again János to be such an important player in this team. And he's only gone on to do the same thing this year. This guy, I'm telling you, is going to be a monster. We'll talk about him a little bit more though, and his actual progress later in the video. But now it's time to talk about transfers, because as you would have already guessed from the title and what I said in the intro, we have sold an inordinately large amount of players during this window. The idea was to freshen up the squad for the final run to the end of the save, to give some of the young players a chance to come to fruition and really bed themselves into the team, and to get a lot of money for some players who are kind of, I'd say, at their peak, but maybe just beyond their peak, to the point where this is the most we'd ever get for them. So let's talk about that now, and then get into some of the players we have picked up, because we've still made some very shrewd signings this season, I believe. Our first big out was backup goalkeeper Demoko Asoko, the Malian international keeper at 24. Very solid keeper. The problem was, quite simply, he was never going to be our starting goalkeeper, because no matter how good he is not as good as Liam Cooper. It just goes without saying. Just to give you an idea of just how good Liam Cooper is, he's 24 years old and these are his attributes. He might be one of the best regen goalkeepers I've ever seen on Football Manager, and he actually plays well in the match engine. Who knew? Next was another out that we were a little on the fence about, and that was Mario Mihail, 32-year-old Hungarian international who'd been with us for a good amount of time, but Manchester United locked down an offer of £46.5 million. And I think part of the reason for it was we had some young players that we wanted to slowly bring into the squad, and we felt that trying to get rid of a couple of the guys that were sort of 32 and older, or 31 I think actually was when he left, was the right move for us at the time to get the money in. And so we took the money from Manchester United. I always do feel a little bit like, ooh, about strengthening, in a way, the Premier League teams in this save. It's just often they're the ones with all the money, and they often hold a lot of the cards. And if we want to progress financially, which we kind of had to, then it was a necessary evil, so to speak. Next was an even bigger transfer out. Stefan Carpanu, £67 million to Real Madrid for the 31-year-old Romanian. The biggest one of the bunch, in fact. £200 million release clause he's got there too. He never really became I mean, he's played a lot of games for us, like, as you can see, 184 league games, but he just never really was a starting option for us at any point, and it just felt like maybe this was the year we could just cash in, as he only had 1 year left on his contract. A lot of these guys did as well, so it was either sell them now or give them one more big contract, and then it was just a bit of, not dead weight, but it would have been weighing us down financially, and I wanted to bring through some young stars to just refreshen the squad. Very similar story, in fact, it was for Josiba Nieto as well, who's been a fantastic servant in his 2 years that he's done at the club, has been amazingly good. But Inter gave us £40 million. He'd already said that he was going to explore his options, and we couldn't seem to turn him around on that one. Didn't really want to give him another massive contract before that anyway. So when the deal came along, Inter gave us £40 million. The one thing I will say about this is Real Madrid offered us £55 million earlier in the transfer window, and he turned down their contract. So he cost us £15 million just by doing that. Now, we made so much money that I don't care too much, but come on, Josiba. I thought we were friends. And the last of the big outs, there were some others that make up the rest of that money, but they were mostly like 6 million, 7 million, 8 million here, those types of players, was Ulysses Anderson. Now, you'll probably remember about a decade ago when we signed this chap from River Plate over in Argentina. He spent most of his career on loan at various clubs, Diószegedőry and Újpest, but due to Újpest's sort of struggles over recent years, he decided to come back. We were happy to keep him around for a little while, as a lot of the bids were more in the 5 to 8 million kind of range, but then all of a sudden, Spurs and Chelsea had a bidding war, and eventually £35.5 million, and he was allowed to make the move to Chelsea in the end. And I still think with the depth we had in that position, we weren't too fussed about losing a 28-year-old squad player. So for that kind of money, we were really happy to see that, and it massively sorted our finances out. We went up to like 300 million in the bank. It's not quite as healthy now, but we have still signed some players, of course, so that's mostly the reason. And let's get into those signings now. First up was Kenshiro Goto. Now, we actually discovered him while we were just doing some random looking through national teams of, you know how we like to do this occasionally, national teams of nations slightly around the world, and we found that he was already in, I think, the under 23 squad or something like that. No, maybe he already had a cap, actually. I'm honestly not sure. Regardless, he's a very good player. We picked him up for 500 grand, and I think he's an absolute worldie, potentially. Anyway, he's still only 19 years old, but already has 2 goals in 4 caps. What a player. Then there was £5 million on Christian Eliseice from Velez, who's on loan at Paxi in the second tier at the moment, but has had a full season for them. I'm really liking his work. He's developing nicely, just has solid base attributes, and for 5 million, I still think he's a brilliant player. Then one that we very much like, and this player, I can't believe I'm saying this, came through a recruitment focus. We've been using a new set of recruitment focuses that James and Kathy from chat came up with. I will link the video that he made about the recruitment focuses in the description to this one. I really do urge you to check it out, because if you hate them as much as I do, this might make you hate them a little bit less, because they will find you some absolute gems. And one of them was Hugo Paredes, 1.1 million from Villarreal. He's been on loan at Mezgevej this season, and he's had a worldie Villa. He may have only scored 3 goals, but what a season he's had, and he's been a part of something very special, which we'll get to later. Next on a free transfer was Eduardo Ramirez. As much as we were shipping out some of the older talent, we also brought some in purely because he was free. We were able to bring him on a free transfer from PSG, and we just thought that his attributes alone will make him an excellent player in our system, being good on both feet, even if it was just here for a year, and I'm very much certain that it will just be for a year. My aim is, in fact, to sell him in this summer, and the fact that he's wanted by Chelsea, thank you, Chelsea. Once again, the ATM of football clubs at the moment. If we get 20, 30 million for Ramirez in this summer, it's going to be an absolute dreamboat for us at 33, considering we paid nothing for him, and especially when I talk to you about the tactical changes coming up later in the video. I meant to say there was more recruitment focuses, and Enzo was another one. Spain, again, £190,000 from Real Valladolid. 190 grand. He's so good. Next, we have an interesting one. This is Stanimir Petrov, £7.5 million from Ludogorets. Now, he doesn't have the potential ceiling, but we kind of knew that. I actually found him using my attribute filters, just looking through some players, trying to find a new winger for us, just to sort of bed out the squad a little bit. And I wasn't looking for young players, but his attributes are so good in a lot of areas that he just showed up on the search anyway. And we just felt it was the right move for us. He may not have the ceiling of some other players, but he still seems to be a very useful player that can play all across that front line. And those are the kind of players we love. Still only 20, Bulgarian international, love him lots. We also signed J-Lo, for no other reason than that he was called J-Lo. I mean, come on, do I need another reason? It's the same reason we signed Bright Willie. Again, I don't need to explain myself. And that brings us to the final player that we've brought in during this window. We've got some other players ready for the summer that I think are actually potentially world beaters, one of which I will show you in a minute, because yet again, it's a recruitment focus. But this is a guy who we've sort of seen before, maybe, but regardless, when he came through that report, we had to sign him. And this is he. This is Lambertus Schumacher. Tell me that alone, that doesn't add 10 million to his price tag. 26.5 million from Anderlecht. So standard Matt signing an overpriced Belgian. You know the drill. However, I don't think he's overpriced. I think he's an absolute stonker of a player. 20 years old, 2 Belgium caps, 14 tackling, 15 crossing. He's got pace about him. Acceleration's a little on the low side. Really solid mentals. And I think he's genuinely going to be a phenomenal left back for us. And with a huge injury this year to Diego Romero, who literally has missed virtually the entire season. He got a 10-month cruciate ligament injury. And we've really been struggling in that left back spot this season. When Lambertus joined us in January, he's already featured in 11 matches for us in the second half of the season. To give you an idea of the sort of quality and importance this guy's brought to us, he's straight into the first team, honestly. Oh, and this is the future dude I was talking about. This is Erkan Kilic. He's 15 years. He might be one of the best attribute-wise 15-year-old players I've ever seen. Possibly even better than that Norwegian dude I showed you a couple of seasons ago. Now, obviously, not a centre-back. He's got 7 jumping reach, and he's not the tallest. Now, obviously, you can get away with that a little bit sometimes, but not in the type of systems we play. He's very much a defensive midfielder, and that's fine, because he's fantastic there too. Or he will be once we actually sign him and train him. 700 grand for him once he actually eventually joins us is an absolute bargain, particularly from a team like Genk, who I figured would have wanted moon money, but they didn't, especially on his mentals. To have mentals this good at 15 is actually worryingly good. I can't imagine what sort of ceiling he has, but maybe it won't be that good, but he's still got that extra half star there. This guy excites me a lot. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. We may never see him become that phenomenal player, not for us anyway, but still, it's awesome. So tactics, this is what I wanted to show you. Now, we like to just mess around with tactics as the season wears on a little bit, and we decided that we wanted to try something a little bit funky, slightly reminiscent of the tactic I played back in the day with Bolton Wanderers. Those of you that from the Bolton days will remember, we did something a little bit similar to this, but it was even more asymmetric. And let me tell you, friends, let me tell you, this tactic produces some of the most gorgeous football I've ever seen on Football Manager. I don't know how or why, but it just does. It has an inverted wing back on the right here, and the idea is that we have an overlapping centre-back that's going to go into this position and basically act like a winger when we're in possession. This side we've got Diakite, or mostly not him, running up the entire wing with another overlapping centre-back on that side, and Yamin can just kind of cover over if we need to. It plays some gorgeous football, and we score a lot of goals with it. It's exciting. You'll see what I mean a little bit later on, but yeah, I might put this up for download at some point once we've tested it a bit more, but I like this a lot. As for the league, we ended up winning it by 6 points in the end. This was touch and go, my friends. We were, at one point, I believe 6 points behind Haladash, had a game in hand, but still, they've pushed us all the way again. Their second best season ever. They once got 79 points, but in that season we got like 90, so it didn't matter. This is the closest it's been for a while, honestly. And now the problems come slightly further down the league, where you'll note that the usual suspects are out and about, except for Kishvarda, who strengthened their squad, got lots of money as well by selling some squad players, and yet somehow came 9th, thus annoyingly meaning that one of our best sides are going to be out of Europe next season, which means a lot of the loanees could potentially return to us, thus causing us even more problems. It's not ideal. Other not ideal things to come. Now, obviously, this season, we were, of course, dealing with Mezhkavezd as well, who were playing in the Conference League for us. Now, they followed that up this year with, well, again, a pretty abysmal season in the grand scheme of things, but they did at least manage to maintain themselves in 8th spot. Just to catch you up on the second tier as well, Dios Juri, of course, win it on goal difference in the end from Spartacus, who just about sneak in there too. But, yeah, Molfeheva, who've been languishing in this division, weren't even close to getting promoted this year, really. It's crazy how bad they've been. But that's enough about that. It's time to talk about Europe and how we got on with our much refreshed, much younger side. We were very worried about going into those group stage games, whether we would notice any difference, and whether we were actually going to be capable of performing at the same levels as we had in the past. But we really needn't have worried, as in the very first game, we played Liverpool, obviously one of the better sides in Europe, and humped them 3-0. Ramirez, Patrice, who's had a worldie of a season, and Blaz getting the goals. But you can see our lineup for here was very different. So, particularly at the defensive side of things, with Wilson Roberto coming back from his loan as well, we had Hillestad in there, who came back from his loan. The bench gets even more sort of youthful with Kenyatta, Anderson, Goto was even in there, Stojanic too, Janosch making appearances, Laukholm getting in there too, Bigmanovic, Muaz Neseru, the Ethiopian chap that we brought in a few years ago, he's now back in the first team as well. It was very much a much more youthful lineup with a bit of experience dotted in, which only got better for us as we twatted Tottenham 5-1 in the next game. Patrice again, Bigmanovic grabbing a goal, one for Romero, one for Durin, and well, 8-1 over English sides in the first 2 matches. Who cares? The youth are clearly here to stay. Got even better for us, as Basel, with the 2 red cards in this game, allowed us to win 4-0 against the reigning Conference League champions Patrice, Yamin, and 2 more for Blaz. Then we travelled to Villarreal, made it 4 wins out of 4, Edvaldo and Janosch getting himself yet another Champions League goal and killing the game off. Not an easy one for us, but we were still the better side and thoroughly deserved 4 wins out of 4. Then, unfortunately, we got our first sort of the season, really. Sem came off the bench to grab us what we thought was the winner, but then Keenan Gabella, a name you'll be hearing about a little bit later in this video, managed to get them an equaliser. Probably about fair. I think we were still probably slightly the better side, but it's close enough that a draw isn't really out of the world. But we got straight back to it by going to Milan. Claudio Raposo doing bits this season. He's had one of the most outrageous years, considering he's spent most of it injured. You'll see what I mean when we get to his stats later, but it's insane. And then after Christmas, it just got better. A 7-1 hammering of Shakhtar in this game, with our former player Lorival, who we sold to them in this summer for £9 million, scoring. But Hillestad grabbed a brace, Blaz with a hattie in there too, Janosch grabbed a penalty while playing at left back. We had no choice. We were literally sans left backs going into this game because Sogos had been sold and Romero was injured. We'd yet to bring in Schumacher and we had nobody else for the role. So Janosch actually managed to play a really solid game at left back because there is nothing this man cannot do. And we then finished things off with a very comfortable 3-0 hammering of PSV Eindhoven. Van Dam with a brace. Another one from Janosch, this time actually playing as a winger. I think he got an assist in this game too. Yes, he did. Again, fantastic season for him there. And that gave us, 7 wins out of 8. We were wondering what the big fuss was about. The youth were looking very good. So now we turn our attention, of course, to the league table, but also the other Hungarian sides. And this is where things start the roller coaster, because it was not as good a season as it really should have been. We obviously won the group, which we just seem to do every year. Haladash, doing their bits again, managed to come third and put up some fantastic results once more. But then you have to start looking a bit further down. Honvéd, 14th place, did the business, they got in, and now is where it turns to rubbish. Because Ferencváros managed to come 27th. They got 7 points, but only 1 win. which was against FC Copenhagen. Not what you want. And the worst thing about it really was one of their defeats was against Bodø. They really should have been winning that. There's no excuse for not beating a team like Bodø. There was a lot of leeway. And then there was Girmot as well, who failed to win a single match. Only 4 draws in there. Against Chelsea, Ajax, Monaco, and Atalanta, but it was the defeats. Like losing to Red Bull Salzburg and Lyon. They're normally better than that, and that lost us 2 teams in the Champions League before we'd even got through, and the worries began at very much this point. But at least we had us and Halidash through to the round of 16. Honvéd had to settle for the playoff round. But let's just turn our attention to us for a minute, so we can talk about our little run. As our reward for getting through that part was to face off against Ajax, a team that usually we regularly beat. Any team down here really aren't much of a hassle to us these days. That was until we rocked up in the Netherlands and lost. Yeah. It was just one of those games where nothing really seemed to click for whatever reason. You just have those games sometimes. You don't want them in the Champions League knockouts, but as you would have seen a couple of years ago against Inter, that will happen sometimes. Our former player as well, Abdülkarim Boya, scored both of their goals. Raposo yanked us back into the game, thankfully. And we felt, you know what? Going into the home leg with only a 2-1 deficit, that's actually not too bad. We would have liked to have won, but it is what it is. Yeah, and that was until this happened. So basically, we started off strong. Abraham Ramirez was sent off after 15 minutes. He has no dirtiness that we could see, just randomly decided to 2-foot someone 15 minutes into the game, and at that point we kind of just went, right, this is not happening for us, and it kind of wasn't. That being said, Blaz did manage to get us back and level the tie after 31 minutes, but then as having 10 men started to wear on us a little bit more, and we sort of had to start debating whether we wanted to defend or attack, given that it was a draw, things went a little bit wrong. And unfortunately, in the 84th minute, it was a second phase of set-piece goal. We won the ball back off of them in our penalty area, ready to clear it. And then our player just stood there with the ball at his feet and waited for the Ajax player to take the ball off him so he could score. One of those, what we like to call match engine games, where it feels like essentially you're in a passenger seat and nothing you do makes any difference. But it is what it is. Going out to Ajax, they're stupidly disappointing, considering that's 2 out of the last 3 years we've randomly gone out in the round of 16. It was round of 16, win the final, round of 16 exit. Very strange, but what can you do? They were just better in the end, but it was weird. Now, Honvéd's reward for getting a top half finish was to play Inter, because of course it was. And the first leg went like this, appallingly. A 5-1 defeat in Milan. If I remember correctly, the XG for this game is terrifying. Yeah. 1.93 versus 1.7, and they lost 5-1. Had no possession, but just got rinsed through the middle. And unfortunately, in the second leg, they couldn't turn it around. They did manage to win the game in the end, but it wasn't enough. Bengsord with the goal, Jose Carlos with another one there, and it's just... Honestly, if you add up both the games, they were probably the better side, but conceding 5 out of nowhere like that, you just can't do that and expect to get through. It was a sign of things to come. We should have seen this as a premonition. But Halidash, of course, got themselves a bye to the next round, where they would face off against Juventus. And started off extremely well. A 1-1 draw in Turin, Pavoni with the goal, a late one from Keenan Gabella unfortunately bailed Juve out, and especially annoying was this, the fact that they played so well in this game and just could not take their chances. But we did feel very confident about the home leg based on how they played here. Thankfully, we needn't have been, as they went and lost 2-0 at home to Juventus with Keenan Gabella scoring both the goals again. It's just not been our year as far as Hungarian sides in the Champions League goes. Particularly as, once again, you look... It's just, oh, God. The XG monster really has hit us hard this season. Less us, more other Hungarian teams. But that's fine, we said, because we've got the Europa League on our hands. We've got Debrecen and we've got Kisvárda. They can hopefully do the business. And to be fair to them, they made a bloody good go of it. Kisvárda came 6th in the Europa League group. 5 wins, no defeats. Bear in mind, at this point, by the time this group had finished, they had more points in the Europa League than they had in the league. That should tell you everything about their season. And Debrecen, of course, were in there too. Solid season for them. 13th place, top half, and that's what matters. They would, of course, have to play an extra game, but that's fine. But they were drawn against Hertha. Not an easy side. Not that it mattered to them, as they went and won 3-0 in the away game. Arun with the goal, and then one for Saar as well to knock that one off too. 3-0 victory, cruising themselves through, as in the second leg, well, they just decided to go and do it again, this time by 3-1. A 6-1 hammering of Hertha was very surprising to us, but it really showed the quality that they had. As in the next round, they'd once again have to do it against German opposition in the form of Wolfsburg, whereas Kisvárda would have a somewhat easier time against Legia. Not that they let it affect them. Debrecen with a 1-0 win against Wolfsburg, and Kisvárda went and won in Poland against Legia, and a 2-1 victory there too. Really looking very, very solid in this tournament. Second legs didn't change a lot either. 1-1 draws in both games, but they did both progress through to the quarterfinals, and that's really good news. And they knew that if they got through their quarterfinals, they would actually play each other in the semis, but in order to do that, they had to get past both Benfica and Real Sociedad, 2 very difficult sides, as they very much found out. Benfica with the 3-1 victory over them in the first leg, with a guy called Maisel Mace. What a great name that is, but 3-1 deficit, very tough. Real Sociedad, on the other hand, slipped there and let Kisvárda grab a 1-1 draw in the match, which went appallingly. Debrecen lose 1-0 at home to Benfica. They drawed the second leg 1-0 as well, with Cisse and Zolio in the 93rd minute as well. And then Real Sociedad won on penalties. And do you know what I mentioned about the XG monster? We're going to mention him again. Let's have a look. Yeah. Oh, God. I'm going to cry if I look at it any longer. That must have been one of their only chances of the entire game in the 93rd minute. And then they went out on bloody penalties. They were so close to a semi-final. But yes, just was not our day. So that left us all out there. And our only hopes relied on Mezhkevezh of the Conference League, a team we'd ridiculed when they'd gotten into it in the first place, but then they did something very surprising, in that not only did they manage to get into the Conference League properly, which was very touch and go, as they managed to knock out Sevilla in the final playoff round, which is amazing by itself, not to mention the fact that Leeds were also beaten, and therefore we had a great run at it this year. Then they managed to put down a 5th place running, which is insanely good for what is quite a poor side in the grand scheme of things. 4 wins in there too, a single draw, and the only team they lost to was the team that eventually won the entire group, which is just a fantastic result for them to get through to the, top 8. Insane stuff, straight through to the round of 16. But in that round of 16, they would draw Club Brugge, an extremely strong side from Belgium, and lost the first leg, unfortunately, with a guy called Tygat, and then Colin getting the goals to a 2-1 defeat. Not really expecting much out of them at this point. Went into the second leg, and, well, would you believe it? They pulled it off. A 2-0 win at home, with Paredes scoring one of his 3 goals this season, and Juan giving them an absolutely brilliant result against Club Brugge, and through to the quarterfinals. They'd done all that we could have expected of them. But then they got very lucky, and actually drew PAOK in the next round, who had come 21st, I think, in the group stages, and I think were the weakest team left in the competition. And it didn't really show, as they unfortunately drew 3-3 against them at home, with a guy called Fishnik Pashai getting 3 goals for PAOK, a guy we nearly signed a few years ago. Not an ideal result for them. But it needn't have mattered, as they went to Greece and won 4-0. A hat-trick from Juan, 1 from Alfred, another one of our loanees, gave them a brilliant result there, as Hoffenheim had also knocked out the favourites Trabzonspor. Partizan were through, as were Lech Poznan. The field was not particularly strong, and they went to Serbia and won. Killen, Juan and Lipinski with the goals for a 3-2 win in Serbia, which was then just flattened out by Juan giving them a 1-0 victory over FK Partizan. And would you bloody believe it? The underdog story continues, as Mezhkevezh have reached a Conference League final. They will play Hoffenheim, who are a strong side, but honestly, I think there are much better sides in this tournament. I think they've genuinely got a chance at winning a Conference League, and that would be insane, particularly as you can tell from this season the way it's gone, coefficient hasn't been super strong for us this year, which means that we were going to be slipping back down to 7 teams in Europe, except if they win the Conference League, because if they do, they would go into the Europa League next year, guaranteed, and we'd actually end up with a stronger position of having 3 teams in the Europa League next year, which is probably better for us anyway, which makes me very happy, particularly when you look at the coefficients on this year. We're not even top 2. We're not even close. 18 points. It's still better than the year we're losing, but the point about it this year is England were losing a 24-point year and we were losing a 7-point year. The gap got tiny at the start of the year, and annoyingly, England have managed to stretch it by nearly 4 points again. And it was such a missed opportunity for us, really, but unfortunately, we can't control what the other Hungarian sides do, and we can barely control what we can do ourselves, and that's been the real letdown for us this year. The overall coefficients, we're still so far clear. 12 points clear of Spain in second. Like, we're never going to fall out of second just by being consistent, but now the gap's back to 9. Now, what I will say is we will still gain, over the next 2 seasons, another 4 points on England. And that's fine and all, but when do we ever outscore them? We need them to fall off a little bit, and even this year, with having less teams in Europe but still getting counted as having more teams, they've still put down an absolute worldie of a year. I can't guarantee they're going to keep doing that, but it does seem unlikely that they're going to be able to let us in there. But still, we've done very well, and the fight will continue. Now, to the youth intake, where it was a half-star youth intake. We were delivered a half-star youth intake, but there was actually a player worth talking about. And this is he. This is Roland Virag. Not a bad player by any means. Solid player. He's nothing special. He's not Janos, but then we'll compare everybody to Janos at this point. He's decent, and that's really all we can say about him. But it's better than expected and not bad for a half-star youth intake. Now, in terms of stats for the season, it's been a year. Blaz breaks every record we have. 54 goals this season. He's truly been a monster. He did get 12 in one game at one point. We can't ignore that. We beat someone 22-0 in a cup match. We don't know how it happened. It just sort of happened, and Blaz did get 12 of those. But still, that happens sometimes, right? No? Okay, never mind. Point is, 54 goals. Very solid. Not to mention the 15 assists that he added to his tally this year. He got 69 goal contributions this season. Nice. Which is actually phenomenal work, and probably the best we've ever had in one of these Building a Nation stages for a single season, even back in the days of Ovalar and Classy Netneck. But it's also worth noting that Patrice Villome, our centre-back, got 16 goals this season. He truly has become the greatest centre-back we've had in many years. I mean, genuinely, he's been phenomenal for the last 5 or 6 years. Absolutely flawless in there as well. Ignore some of these guys. This is some like weird stuff for the second team in there as well. But Bigmanovic, of course, with 21 assists and 14 goals is an unbelievable return for him. Janos, though, 12 assists and 10 goals this year. A decent record. It's the same as last year exactly in terms of his numbers, although he did play a few more matches this year, but I'm still not bothered by that. I think he's still developing really, really well, as I'll show you in a minute. Hillestad came into the squad this year, played a lot more. 8 assists, 10 goals. Really, really happy for him, for the 22-year-old in there too. Raposo, again, 18 assists and 8 goals. Point being, he only started 15 matches. Man only played 1,200 minutes of football this season and managed to combine for 26 goal contributions. He has 13 assists in 10 league starts, but what I will say is most of those came in like the first 6 matches of the season. It's insane. So all in all, statistically, a very good season for us, but just want to show you in on János for a second to show you how he's developing. 19 years old now, 12 caps for Hungary already, 4 goals for the national team too, but he is just developing like nobody's business. He won the Next Gen Award this year after being on it for the first time in ages, or for every single year. He's also won Rookie of the Year every single year. He was Golden Boy as well. He's kind of hitting every single individual award, and I can sort of see why, really. He's only 19, but his attribute progression over the first sort of few years of his career is absolutely outrageous. He is hitting the ground running and is starting to become a genuine starter for us more often than not. And that will only increase as we start to move on with this new tactic where it's either him or Edvaldo, basically. The only reason we even put the winger in it is so we have a place to put János, and then it just kind of worked. So we're kind of happy with that. And I think he'll definitely get a lot of game time in the coming seasons. I'm sweating so bad right now. It's actually insane. It's already 33 in here at the moment. And it is moist, my friends. Just to really keep that whistle firmly moist. So loan farm progress, you'll see the loan farm has shrunk this year. We let some players go on permanent transfers, as well as bringing some guys back because we felt that it served our purposes a little bit more. So Juan obviously has a lot of goals out on loan, as does Hungary, which is obviously, his name's Gary, but we call him Hungary because now he plays for Hungary. You can see we're very creative over on stream. 36 goals in the second tier for Vasas, not bad. What I will say though is I still feel like the best player out on loan, look at Honvi, some of the talent they've got is insane. For me, the best player we currently have out on loan, other than Molina, who is an excellent world-class centre-back, but I still think personally that Beng Sword might be one of the best strikers in world football, and here he is just on loan from us. Now, could he play for us? Absolutely, but I feel like he's doing way more good when he's playing for Honvéd, scoring that amount of goals in the Champions League. 8 in the Champions League this season is insane. He's an insane player. But something we've also started to prioritize now is that we feel like being able to provide good loan players to the other clubs is not really relevant to us anymore because there's not enough time for those players to beat into their squads and become good. So now we're just kind of focused on ourselves for the last couple of years of the save and letting the kind of existing loan farm structure exist as it is. And if they do want any players, they can have them, but it's unlikely that we're going to be firing out any more loan farm signings really, other than the just ones they might want essentially. And obviously finances this year are stacked. 261 million in the bank. We actually were up to over 300 million at one point. Now this year it would be more, but we've also hemorrhaged 50 million in prize money, just like we did for not qualifying later in the Champions League last time. We'll get a little bit more money back once the final between Arsenal and Chelsea. Oh, terrible for a Building a Nation save. Happens, but still. But there we have it. So the aim for this year, of course, is going to be, obviously, Mezhkovec hopefully winning the Conference League, giving us that 8th team in Europe, but giving us a slightly better set of teams in the right places, which I think will benefit us massively next year. We've got to have a better season in the Champions League. If the pattern continues, we're probably likely to win the damn thing. The problem is we just need the other Hungarian sides to step up their game a little bit and not go out the group stages, and maybe just get a bit of luck on the XG in the knockouts and maybe just live up to it at least. But yeah, hopefully we can get that back. There was that Giamot result from a few years ago, so it does sort of, but it doesn't balance out in any way. But that's what we're going to be doing over on stream. We're going to be doing transfers, doing some actual proper transfer hunting as well, not just looking for youth players. We actually want to sign a few first team players because our transfer budget is 270 million pounds. We have money to spend is what I'm saying, and I don't mind dropping a big chunk of it this summer if we feel like we can find the right players for the role. So if you have enjoyed this video, and I hope you have, drop a like, that'd be great. Join us over on stream right now, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Hold your gun, capybara, bye-bye.